My name is Sebastian Vance. At 60 years old, I have learned that power is not about who speaks the loudest, but who knows the most secrets. I live in a world of marble, glass, and steel. My London townhouse is a fortress of wealth, filled with art that costs more than most people earn in a lifetime. I am a man of routines. I like my coffee at 6 a.m., my financial reports at 6:15 a.m., and my silence absolute. 3 years ago, I broke my golden rule. I allowed a woman to enter my silence. Isabella was a whirlwind of grace. She was 27, a violinist with hands that seemed too delicate for this world. When I met her at a gala in Vienna, she looked at me not as a billionaire, but as a man who was lonely at the top. Or, so I thought. I married her within 6 months. I gave her the Vance name, the Vance diamonds, and the keys to my empire. For 3 years, our marriage was a masterpiece of performance. We traveled to the Maldives, we skied in St. Moritz, and we hosted the elite of London. She was the perfect trophy, and I was the proud owner. But as any investor knows, when a deal looks too perfect, you're missing the hidden costs. The cost revealed itself on a rainy Tuesday in late April. Isabella was away at a wellness retreat in the Cotswolds. I was looking for a specific set of cufflinks in her dressing room, a pair given to me by the King of Norway. I opened a small, inconspicuous drawer in her vanity. Inside was a burner phone and a handwritten ledger. I am a man who deals in data. I opened the ledger, expecting to see dress sizes or guest lists. Instead, I saw a map of my demise. There were dates of my last 3 physical exams. There were notes on my blood pressure readings. There were names of my bank managers and the specific codes for my offshore accounts in Panama. And then, I saw the name Julian. I turned on the burner phone. There were hundreds of messages. He's getting complacent, Julian. The older he gets, the more he trusts me. We are close. I've started giving him the special vitamins. He thinks he's just tired from work. The reply from Julian made my blood turn to ice. Good. The sooner he's under the ground, the sooner we're on the yacht. Don't get cold feet now, my love. We've worked too hard for this. I didn't move for 10 minutes. I sat in the dim light of the dressing room, the smell of her expensive French perfume surrounding me like a chokehold. I didn't feel sadness. I felt a cold, crystalline clarity. They wanted a ghost. I would give them one. I didn't call the police. I didn't call a lawyer. In my world, the law is a blunt instrument. I needed a scalpel. I drove through the heavy London fog to a small private clinic in Marylebone. Dr. Aris Thorne was waiting for me. Aris was a brilliant cardiologist who had made a catastrophic mistake 5 years ago, an affair that led to a blackmail attempt. I had made the problem vanish with a single phone call. He owed me his life. Sebastian, you're not due for a checkup for 6 months, Aris said, looking nervous. I'm not here for a checkup, Aris. I'm here for a death sentence. I explained the situation. I showed him the messages. I told him about the ledger. Aris grew pale. Sebastian, you're asking me to fabricate a terminal illness. That's insane. If the medical board found out. The medical board will only find out if you refuse, I said softly. I need Isabella to believe I have 90 days left. I need a diagnosis that explains why I will become weak, why I will lose weight, and why I will eventually die in my sleep. We'll call it hypertrophic cardiomyopathy with a rare viral complication. And the treatment? Aris asked. Something she has to administer, something that looks like a high-stakes clinical trial. I need to give her the opportunity to kill me, Eris. If she takes it, she loses everything. The next evening, I orchestrated my first episode. I was in the dining room with Isabella. The table was set with silver and fine bone china. She was telling me about her yoga classes, her voice like a melodic song. I reached for my wine glass, let my hand tremble, and allowed the glass to slip. It shattered. Red wine spilled across the white linen like a fresh wound. I clutched my chest and let out a strangled gasp. I collapsed onto the floor, making sure to knock over my chair. "Sebastian! Oh my God, Sebastian!" Isabella screamed. She was at my side in a second. Her eyes were wide, filled with a panic that I now knew was not love, but fear that the golden goose was dying before the papers were signed. I let my eyes roll back. "Can't breathe." I wheezed. The ambulance arrived. The sirens echoed through the quiet streets of Chelsea. At the hospital, Eris Thorne played his part perfectly. He walked into the waiting room 4 hours later, looking exhausted and grim. "Isabella," he said, taking her hands, "I'm so sorry. The scans, they show a massive thickening of the heart wall. It's a rare aggressive condition. We can try an experimental drug, but I have to be honest with you. Sebastian has maybe 3 months, 90 days at best." Isabella collapsed into a chair. She sobbed into her hands. It was a beautiful, heartbreaking performance. I watched her through the cracked door of my hospital room. Even then, I admired her skill. She wasn't just a grifter. She was an artist. I returned home 3 days later. The house had changed. Isabella had moved me into the guest suite on the ground floor, claiming I shouldn't climb the stairs. She dismissed the cook and the maid, saying we needed privacy and peace during my final days. She became my shadow. She was always there with a glass of water, a warm blanket, or a soft word. And every morning at 8 a.m., she brought me my medicine. I had hidden cameras in the kitchen, disguised as smoke detectors. I spent my afternoons napping while watching the footage on my phone. I watched her take the capsules Eris had provided, which were harmless rice powder, and open them. She would then reach into a hidden jar behind the flour container. It was filled with a greenish-gray powder, digitalis. It's a common heart medication, but in high doses, it's a lethal poison that mimics a heart attack. She was very careful. She used a small silver scale to measure the dosage. She was increasing it every 3 days. She was weaning me onto a diet of death. "Here you go, Sebastian," she whispered one morning, her hand stroking my hair. "Drink this. It's the new batch from Dr. Thorne. It will make you feel better." "Thank you, Isabella," I said, my voice weak and rasping. "You are my only light in this darkness." I took the pill and placed it under my tongue. As soon as she left the room to get some air, I would spit the pill into a small, airtight plastic pouch I kept taped inside my pajama bottoms. I was building a collection. Every pill was a brick in her prison cell. By day 20, I began to fade. I stopped eating the food she cooked, hiding it in the trash and surviving on protein bars I kept in my safe. I used makeup to darken the circles under my eyes. I wanted her to see the face of a man who was already halfway to the grave. I wanted her to feel the thrill of victory, because the higher she climbed, the further she would have to fall. By day 40, the London townhouse no longer felt like a home. It felt like a waiting room for a funeral. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and the metallic tang of the medicine Maya was brewing. Every time she entered the room, she wore a mask of tragedy, but I could see the twitch in her fingers. She was restless. She wanted the clock to tick faster. It was on a Tuesday, exactly 6 weeks into my illness, that the car arrived. A sleek, charcoal gray Bentley pulled into the drive. I watched from the second-story window, hidden behind the heavy velvet curtains. A man stepped out. He was younger than me, perhaps 40, with a physique maintained by expensive gyms and a face maintained by arrogance. This was Julian Vane. In the messages I had intercepted, he was the architect of my financial ruin. In person, he looked exactly like what he was, a vulture in a bespoke suit. "Sebastian, darling," Maya said, gliding into my bedroom 10 minutes later. Her voice was a soft coo, but her eyes were cold. "A representative from the solicitors is here. Mr. Sterling. He says there are some final documents for the Vance Foundation that need your signature. I told him you were very tired, but he says it's urgent." "Sterling," I whispered, letting my voice crack. "Yes, send him in. I want everything settled." Julian entered. He didn't offer a handshake. He stood at the foot of my bed, looking down at me with a mixture of pity and triumph. He saw a dying lion, a man who once controlled the shipping lanes of the Atlantic, now reduced to a skeleton under a silk duvet. "Mr. Vance," Julian began, his voice a practiced, oily baritone. "I have the revised articles of the estate. These ensure that upon your transition, the board of directors is bypassed. The decision-making power moves directly to your widow. It streamlines the process. No messy audits, no delays." I looked at the papers. They were a masterpiece of legal theft. If I signed them, Maya and Julian could liquidate my entire fleet within 48 hours of my pulse stopping. "Give me the pen," I wheezed. Maya leaned over me, her perfume, a heavy floral scent called noir, filling my lungs. It was the scent she wore the night we met. Now it smelled like a shroud. I signed the documents. I used a specific jagged signature. To a bank, it looked like the hand of a dying man. To my private security firm, it was a Signal 10, the code for a hostile takeover. That evening, believing I was sedated, Maya hosted a private dinner for Julian in the dining room directly below my suite. They didn't realize I had replaced the decorative crown molding with high-fidelity directional microphones. I sat in the dark, wearing a pair of noise-canceling headphones, listening to my wife laugh. "To the 90 days!" Julian's voice echoed. I heard the clink of crystal glasses. "He looks terrible, Maya. Even better than the photos. How is the digitalis dose?" "I've tripled it," Maya replied. I could hear her pouring more wine. "He started having palpitations. He thinks it's the experimental drug. He actually thanked me this morning for being his angel. It's almost pathetic." "It's not pathetic. It's profitable," Julian said. "Once the death certificate is signed by Thorne, we move the Panama funds first. Then we sell the London property. I've already contacted a buyer in Dubai. They'll pay cash." "And the ships?" Maya asked. "Already brokered. We'll be halfway to Singapore before the board even realizes the locks have been changed." I sat in the silence of my room, recording every word. They weren't just talking about money. They were talking about my life as if it were a piece of old furniture to be sold at an auction. A cold, dark fire began to burn in my chest. It wasn't the digitalis. It was the iron vault preparing to close. On day 60, I initiated the invisible strike. while Maya was at the spa, spending my money to prepare for her debut as a billionaire widow. My security chief, Miller, arrived through the service entrance. Miller was a former MI6 operative who specialized in corporate forensics. "We have them, Mr. Vance," Miller said, standing in my dressing room. "We've traced Julian Vane's history. He's not a lawyer. He's a failed stockbroker with 3 offshore fraud investigations against him. And Maya. Her real name is Maya Rossi. We found her records in Naples. She's been doing this for a decade. You're her 4th target, but the first one who survived long enough to fight back." "And the previous 3?" I asked. "Dead. All heart failure. All left their estates to a devoted nurse or young bride who disappeared 6 months later." I looked at the photos of the other men. They looked like me. Older, successful, lonely. Maya had a type. She hunted the men who had everything except someone to watch their backs. "Miller," I said, my voice no longer a whisper. "I want the board of directors informed, but silently. Tell them to prepare for a special dividend meeting on day 90 and contact the Singapore buyers. Tell them the Vance ships are not for sale, but the man who offered them is. I want Julian Vane's credit lines frozen at the exact moment I die. And the digitalis, sir. Keep collecting it. I want a mountain of evidence that even a blind judge couldn't ignore." As we entered the final stretch, day 75 to day 89, the tension in the house became unbearable. Maya stopped pretending to be the nurse. She began taking phone calls in front of me, speaking in Italian to her mother about the villa she was buying in Lake Como. She would bring me my medicine and leave it on the nightstand without a word, her eyes fixed on her reflection in the mirror, practicing her grieving widow face. One night, she forgot to close the door. I saw her standing in the hallway, looking at a portrait of me that hung above the stairs. She wasn't looking at it with love or even regret. She looked at it the way a person looks at a piece of trash they are about to throw away. "Soon, Sebastian," she whispered to the painting. "Soon. I won't have to smell your old age anymore." I stayed in the shadows of the bed, my pulse steady, my mind sharp. I was no longer a dying man. I was a hunter who had successfully led the wolves into the trap. The stage was set for day 90. The guests were invited. The champagne was on ice, and the iron vault was ready to lock the door. This final chapter brings the tension to a boiling point. To help you reach that massive script length, this section focuses on the sensory details of the gala, the psychological breakdown of the villains, and the legal precision of the Iron Vault's final strike. Day 89 was the quietest day of my life. The London townhouse was being transformed. Florists arrived with thousands of white lilies, the flowers of death and rebirth. Caterers moved through the kitchen, preparing a feast for a funeral that hadn't happened yet. Maya was a whirlwind of dark energy. She had bought a black lace dress from a designer in Paris that cost more than a mid-sized sedan. She spent 3 hours in front of her vanity, practicing her breathing, learning how to make her chest heave with fake sobs. I stayed in my room, the door locked from the inside. Miller had delivered my final equipment, a wireless microphone hidden in my tie, and a small high-tech pulse simulator that I wore on my wrist. "Tonight is the night, Sebastian," Maya whispered through the door at 6 p.m. "The guests are arriving. They want to pay their respects. Are you ready?" "I am ready, Isabella," I replied, my voice a ghostly rasp. "I am more ready than you know." By 9 p.m., the house was filled with the elite of London. I could hear the murmur of voices, the clink of silverware, and the soft, mournful music of a string quartet playing in the foyer. They were drinking my 1945 Bordeaux, bottles I had saved for a special occasion. I suppose this qualified. I watched the live feed on my tablet. Maya was holding court in the ballroom. She looked radiant in her morning black. Julian stood at her side, his hand frequently touching the small of her back, a gesture of ownership that made my skin crawl. Sebastian wanted us to celebrate life, Maya told the group, her voice trembling perfectly. He knew his time was short, but his vision for the Vance Foundation was eternal. Julian has been a pillar of strength during this transition. Julian stepped forward, raising a glass. "To Sebastian Vance, a man who knew when to hold his cards and when to fold them." In my room, I checked my watch. 10 p.m. The exact moment Dr. Thorne had predicted my heart failure. I pressed a button on my pulse simulator. Downstairs, the speakers, which were connected to my medical monitors, began to emit a slow, rhythmic thump that gradually sped up, then became erratic, and finally, a long, piercing, flat beep. The ballroom went silent. I heard Maya's scream, a high, sharp sound that was more triumph than terror. The guests stood frozen. Maya and Julian exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated greed. They moved toward the grand staircase, followed by a trail of curious, shocked onlookers. "He's gone," Maya sobbed into Julian's chest. "My Sebastian is gone." "It's over, Maya," Julian whispered, loud enough for the hidden microphones to catch. "We've won. Let's get the certificate signed and get out of this tomb." They reached the top of the stairs, but the door to the master suite didn't open. Instead, the lights in the hallway dimmed and a massive projector screen lowered over the foyer, blocking their path. The screen flickered to life. It didn't show my medical records. It showed the kitchen. It showed Maya Rossi, not Isabella Vance, grinding oleander leaves. It showed her measuring the digitalis. It showed Julian Vane laughing about the old man's smell. The guests below gasped. Some began to record with their phones. Maya's face turned the color of ash. Julian stepped back, his eyes darting toward the exits. And then the door opened. I walked out. I wasn't the skeleton they expected. I was upright, my shoulders broad, wearing a midnight blue suit that fit perfectly. I looked like the iron vault they had feared for decades. "The problem with vultures, Julian," I said, my voice echoing off the marble walls, "is that they often start feasting before the prey is actually dead. It leads to indigestion." Maya fell to her knees, not in grief, but in total psychological collapse. "But the medicine, I saw you take it. I watched you fade." "You watched a performance, Maya," I said, walking down the stairs toward her. "I've been collecting your medicine for 90 days. It's currently being cataloged by the Metropolitan Police, along with your real identity papers from Naples. It seems your previous 3 husbands weren't quite as observant as I am." Julian tried to make a break for the front door, but Miller and 4 other men in dark suits stepped out from the shadows of the coat room. "Julian Vane," Miller said, his voice cold, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, large-scale financial fraud, and the unauthorized brokering of Vance shipping assets. We have the Singapore buyers on the line. They've been very helpful." As the police led them away in handcuffs, the ballroom was silent. I looked at the friends and associates who had come to celebrate my death. I raised my own glass of Bordeaux. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "The party is over, but for the first time in 90 days, the air in this house is finally clean." A week later, the house was empty. The white lilies had been thrown away. Maya and Julian were awaiting trial in separate high-security facilities. Their lawyers were already fighting over who would be blamed for the murder plot. I sat in my study looking at a map of the world. For 60 years I had built walls. I had built an empire. I had built a vault to protect myself. And in trying to protect my life, I had forgotten to live it. I picked up a pen. I didn't write a will. I wrote a resignation letter to the board of directors. I was done with shipping. I was done with venture capital. My name is Sebastian Vance. I am 60 years old. I have 90 days of evidence against the woman I thought I loved, but I have a lifetime of days ahead of me. And for the first time, I'm not calculating the risk. I'm just enjoying the view. Thank you for learning English with us. See you in the next video. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel Storyline English, and turn on notifications to receive more emotional English learning stories in the future.